People have needed the help of the Air Force in times of peace as well as war. What was perhaps the most famous rescue of all came back in 1948. World War II had ravaged the cities of Europe. Russia and the United States, once allies, united against Hitler, were now bitter enemies. Berlin was suddenly embroiled in a new war, a Cold War, without bullets or bombs.
West Berlin is situated deep in the heart of Soviet-held East Germany and isolated from the rest of the free world. After the war, the Russians wanted the Western powers to withdraw from the divided city and return all of Berlin to the east. On June 25, 1948, the Soviets began a blockade. All traffic in and out of Berlin would halt immediately. No food, fuel, or supplies of any kind would be allowed. Their plan was simple. They would starve a city into submission. The Allies refused to retreat. One day after the blockade started, we began the greatest humanitarian operation in history, the Berlin Airlift. Cargo planes from around the world were brought to bases in West Germany and loaded with coal for energy, milk for undernourished children, and flour to feed 2.5 million hungry people. One of the airlift pilots, Lieutenant Gale Halverson of Salt Lake City, Utah, was an avid amateur photographer. He wanted to get some shots of his buddies landing in Berlin and to meet some of the German children he had seen from the air. On his day off, he hopped a flight to Tempelhof Airport for an airman's holiday.
I wanted to see what do they really like. And so I took my movie camera and hiked 2.5 miles around the inside of the barbed wire fence to the approach end of the runway. About 30 kids in the open place watching this operation. And those kids were so grateful for what was happening on the airlift, the supplying their food, that they didn't ask me for any gum or candy. That didn't strike me till I turned around to leave. I reached in my pocket, and all I had was 2 sticks of gum. And that was all. And then I started to go again. And then I said, hey, you might not ever come back here again. You better give them what you got. 2 kids will be happy. So I stopped. I stopped right dead in my tracks and went back to the fence. I took the 2 sticks of gum out of my pocket and broke them in half and got 4, of course. The kids that got the half a stick started to tear off the wrapper and pass pieces of the wrapper around. And kids would be smelling a piece of the wrapper. And I just stood there completely dumbfounded. And I thought, wow, 30 sticks of gum, a whole stick apiece to put these kids on Easy Street. About that time, an airplane came over those bombed out buildings right over their heads and landed. Just in a flash, I said, hey, to myself, what I'll do is when I come over, I can drop my little parachute with gum and candy for everybody.
What began as a simple gesture of kindness soon became a major operation. At first, Halverson dropped his own candy rations. Then his crew pitched in, the squadron, and eventually the entire base. The candy bomber had a hit on his hands.
At first, we used our own personal handkerchiefs to make the parachutes for the candy and the gum. Just handkerchiefs with strings tied to them. And my buddies gave me theirs, and when we ran out of those, we took shirt sleeves and cut them out and made candy bags and shirt tails for parachutes, and it worked great. The people in the United States heard we ran out of handkerchiefs. And all of a sudden, my mail went from 1 letter and 3 weeks from my girlfriend, Alda Jolly, my wife now, to half a bag of mail. And they were filled with handkerchiefs with parachutes. And when I opened the letters, I'd also found out that they'd said I was a bachelor. And some of them were lace, fancy black handkerchiefs. Some of them had perfume on them, fancy ones. We dropped every one of them. Some kids got some pretty fancy handkerchiefs.